seed in the Western Conference after a 104-95 win over the Kings last night. So, Stephen A., what does this mean as you were just trying to break it all down? Make it simple and plain for us.
Well, they've got the number one seed. They've got home court advantage. I think that helps them immensely. But, Skip, I will openly acknowledge it. I'm not going to be, I'm not going to get all on Russell Westbrook. I'm a fan. I like him. I like him. I like his talent. I like his upside. But he picked up, I think it was like his 15th technical yesterday. I'm looking at him and I'm monitoring him and just getting removed from a game, having, you got a referee asking one of his teammates to escort him off the floor. He seems to be losing his composure on far too many occasions. And I'm worried about that because I really, really don't understand it. You've got the number one seed in the Western Conference, or you were en route to getting it, winning 60 games. You've had a highly successful season. The postseason is forthcoming. These things that he argues over, first of all, it's not that important. I know he got slapped in the face and he thought the referee missed a call, and he shouldn't have, and I get that. But at the same time, you've got to be cognizant of the fact that you've picked up your share of technical fouls this year. You've got to be cognizant of the fact that it can end up costing you. You've got to be cognizant of the fact that playing the point guard position, even if you're not the quintessential point guard, you are in a leadership role. And he seems to lose his composure over what I would term to be the slightest things. It just boggles my mind. It's like, why? For what? Relax, fall back. It's cool. Then you come back another day. Somebody didn't punch you in the face. What's your problem? And so to me, I don't understand it. He seems to be rattled emotionally, not by the competition, but by other things, particularly the officials. And it seems to affect his mental approach to the game. While the game is going on, it seems to shift. Like you don't know what you're going to get from him because of it. And that concerns me because those are the kind of things that get in the way of a championship run.
How do you explain it? You say you can't. I'm sure you have a theory.
I think that, Russell, listen, he marches to his own beat. He loves to be different. I never questioned his passion. The dude hasn't missed a game, not high school, not college, not pros. He's a phenomenal physical specimen. But I think that there is some chip on his shoulder where along the way he doesn't feel like he's getting the respect he deserves, the allure he deserves. Whatever it is, it's hard to fathom. I don't know, Skip. I tell you what I do know. I find myself questioning this, and I keep asking myself over and over and over again. Mo Cheeks is one of the most composed guards you will ever see in NBA history.
Agreed.
Okay, a nominee for the Hall of Fame. As feisty as Scott Brooks was, he's also a leader. Derek Fisher is on the roster.
No doubt.
He's the president of the Players Association.
Right.
He's one of the quintessential leaders you'd find in professional basketball. Just an ideal locker room fixture.
Thank you.
I do not understand why three guys, all of whom have been point guards throughout their careers, don't seem to have the kind of influence on Russell Westbrook you would expect. I have to look at Russell Westbrook because I know what kind of influence Mo Cheeks has had because I've seen it. Same thing, I have profound respect for Scott Brooks and Derek Fisher as well. So to me, the problem has to be with Russell because how can these three figures be in the locker room with you and your behavior never changes?
Okay.
I don't understand it.
All the king's horses and all the king's men, ... That's what's going on here. This is a troubled dynamic between the best tandem in the Western Conference, obviously. Kevin Durant, I still think is the best player in the league, though he's got his emotional, psychological issues he's fighting through. Some new demons for him, starting with that uncharacteristic gesture that he did at Golden State that we talked about that he got fined $25,000 for. It's troubled, Stephen A., but is it blessed? Because the harder I look at the wild, wide open West, and I keep telling you, I can't remember it being more wide open than it is right now. No Kobe, Spurs crumbling, even Fareed in Denver's got an ankle issue now. They've had their injury issues in Denver. Clippers still, do I trust them completely in big crunch time in a Western Conference Finals? No, I don't. I still say that by default, Oklahoma City still should win the Western Conference, but they're not as good as they were a year ago without James Harden. That's a huge hole, especially in the postseason for them. And I know James Harden, I know you harp on the fact that he disappeared in games, 3, 4, and 5 in the finals, maybe 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Well, I only bring that up because that's the only problem I've ever had with him. He's a good guy, and he is a sensational player.
Superstar he's turning into. And they are going to miss him. Again, I keep using the stat. He made the most fourth-quarter free throws in the NBA last year. They're going to miss those free throws come playoff time. But still, can I make a case for anybody but Oklahoma City? I cannot. We're going to talk about this a little later in the show. Is Miami even better than Miami was a year ago? Yes. And we'll get into detail about that later. But my point is, it looks like it shapes up for Oklahoma City to back into another Western Conference title and then be really up against it. Remember, they were favored to win last year against Miami. They will not be favored this time. And they're going to have a harder time beating the Heat this finals if, in fact, the Thunder, by default, get to the finals.
Well, first of all, a couple of things I'd like to point out. Number one, I'm not one who believes that Kevin Durant has problems or demons or whatever, simply because I look at him and I see somebody that's being more assertive. And sometimes when you're being more assertive and you've proven to be an unstoppable offensive presence, yet you're so skinny, guys are going to come at you. They're going to get in your face. They're going to try to muscle you. You're going to look to the officials for more assistance. You don't get it. An emotional outburst is bound to happen on a few occasions. I still believe in Kevin Durant. I truly do, even though there's a couple of times, with the technical fouls I've wondered, but the slashing of the throat and all of that other stuff, I told you what was going to happen. He was going to get fined, but he was going to recognize it's something he shouldn't do. Yeah. He was going to acknowledge that it was an ill-advised decision and it wasn't going to happen again. That's not a problem. That's a person who made a mistake and said, hey, it's on me. I'll correct it. It won't happen again.
But you have to admit, it was out of character, right?
Yes, it was. Okay. But at the same time, again, in an effort to be more assertive, those things happen. You learn from your mistakes and you move on. It's only a problem if this continues. Russell Westbrook has a problem because we're continuing to point to the same things over and over and over and over again. That's not the case with Kevin Durant. So that's number one. You look at Oklahoma City. I've said from day one they were going to the finals. Yes, to some degree, it's by default. But I think the problem with Oklahoma City is that the West is so tough that they measure themselves by and large by what they do in the West, when you have to understand, if you're Oklahoma City, years ago you got bounced out in the first round by the Lakers. The next year it was the second round. The year after that it was the conference finals versus Dallas. Last year, it was the NBA Finals. They've made progressive steps every year over the last 4 or 5 years. It is time. It's not about the Western Conference. Right. It's about a championship. And when you're measuring yourself against something other than world championship, you are going to find yourself coming up short. They are not holding themselves to different standards. They're going along the same path they always go along with. They make progressive steps. But you got to hold your feet to the fire and embrace the concept that you are championship or bust. You are talented enough to beat the Miami Heat, or are you not? The answer is, in their eyes, yes, which means they should be acting accordingly instead of finding themselves experiencing some of the same, if not even more problems than they did in the past. Okay, that's not the wise way to go.
I must note, 6 weeks ago, you switched horses. You jumped on my horse, the Spurs, and you said, I got to give it up. I think your Spurs are the best team in the West, and they will win the West. So you weren't that sold at that point on Oklahoma City, and now you're sold by default.
Well, you got to remember, I was sold on Oklahoma City at the beginning. What happened is that once you saw the absence of James Harden and how it had emotionally affected these guys, combined with Tony Parker having an MVP caliber season, it seemed quite obvious what was transpiring before our very eyes. And I had to acknowledge that. But then Manu goes down. And then obviously Tony Parker goes down. What do you want me to say? I believe in Kevin Durant. I believe in the talent of Russell Westbrook. But when you see guys emotionally warped, then that's a problem. Because again, you have to make a decision if you're Oklahoma City more than a year ago. Am I going to re-sign Serge Ibaka and give him that money, or am I going to keep James Harden? And we looked at it from the standpoint that you can't teach 6'9", 6'10", who's a SWAT master and plays defense. That's more valuable than another scorer. Only to come and find out that emotionally, James Harden, Russell Westbrook, and Kevin Durant were so tight.
Yeah, connected.
And the chemistry that they had was so connected that I didn't take that enough into account, how much of a devastating loss he would be, not because of his talent, but because of the bond they had and how they seemed to be trying to find themselves simply because he's gone.
I would have traded Westbrook instead of Harden, but that's just me.
Man, you would.
Coming up next, John.